Are you a serious animal collector that wants to make better buying decisions? If so, this is the show for you. Welcome to episode 2 of the Animal Review Show. Today we are going to look at the Giant Anteater. We have 3 different models to take a look at. Katie, before we jump into the figures, what features are you looking for to see if these models are accurate?
So anteaters, there are 4 species of anteater. We're looking today at the giant anteater, which as the name implies is the largest. Some of the things that I'm really looking for with the giant anteater are going to be those feet. The feet and the claws are going to be really important to these animals. They have to dig through termite mounds in South America. And the walking stance is very specific with giant anteaters. They sort of walk on their knuckles, but they're a little bit skewed inwards to protect those claws. So I'm going to be looking for sort of the stance of the animal and make sure that that's true to life. Looking at the number of toes, each foot should have 5 toes. And that coloration is also very distinct. When you picture an anteater, you picture that this sort of mottled gray animal with that white stripe kind of zigzagging in the middle, and that coloration is going to be pretty important to make sure that the model is true to life.
Which one would you like to get started with?
All right, so we are starting with the Mojo model of the giant anteater. Now, right off the bat, this does have that typical sort of knuckle walking stance that we see on anteaters, at least giant anteaters. So on this model, the front feet look like they have 4 toes, and it's a little bit tough to say, of course, with that balled up fist walking stance. Totally possible that there's another toe squished up in there, but it appears that there are only 4 toes on each hand in the front of this animal. Now, the back feet do have those 5 toes, which is pretty characteristic. So that would kind of be my main critique of this particular model. But aside from that, the coloration is really accurate. The head is pretty proportional, again, to hide that long tongue. So overall, I would say that this model is pretty close.
What about the hair texture?
Yeah, so the hair texture, giant anteaters are really fluffy. That's sort of one of their characteristics, and that is definitely conveyed very accurately here. Relatively coarse hair, especially on that tail, so the hair texture I think overall is pretty accurate. Up next, we have this Papo figure. Right off the bat, this one I'm a little less impressed with. The coloring can definitely vary across individuals. They're not all the exact same shade of that sort of mottled gray or brown, but they're usually not quite as brown as this. This is almost closer to a tamandua, which is a different species of anteater. The stripe here in the middle, it typically has kind of a white highlight around it, which this one is definitely missing. And looking at the feet, which is again the important part, it does appear to have the right number of digits on each foot, which is a plus. But the stance is a little bit off. They don't really quite hold their hands like this. Again, it's usually those front claws are going to be sort of turned inward, and they walk sort of on the outside of their knuckles rather than straight down like this. So the stance is not 100% true to life, nor is the coloring. So I'm a little bit less impressed with this model overall.
Okay.
The last model that we have here, this is the Schleich model. First observations, pretty good. The coloring and the hair texture, especially on that tail, is pretty true to life. It's certainly got his head down, which is a little bit different from the other ones, but that's not all that unusual. A lot of times they'll have their head sort of buried in a termite mound or something to as of course, as the name implies, to eat some ants. Got that really long snout, which is pretty much spot on. Let's look at the feet here. It's got those claws kind of squished into the side. It's going to be really important for these animals to protect those claws. That's how they defend themselves and how they are able to access their food source. So they're pretty important. They want to keep them safe. And this model does a really good job of portraying that. It's got that characteristic kind of white stripe right here in the black patch on the chest, or I'm sorry, on the shoulder. They do often typically have that sort of lighter patch of fur right here on the eyes, so that's pretty accurate.
All right, Katie, decision time. Which one of these 3 giant anteaters do you feel is the most scientifically accurate?
It's a pretty close tie between the Mojo model and the Schleich model. They both have really pretty accurate coloring. The physical stance is really closely true to life. I do particularly like the Mojo model. It's a little bit more accurate in terms of what the walking stance would be. With the Schleich model, you can really see the detail in how the claws fold in underneath the animal, and that's really, really, really true to life. They're pretty darn close, to be perfectly honest. If push came to shove, which is of course what we're doing right now, and I had to pick the best one, it would be Schleich by about this much. But really, they're both pretty exceptional figures.
Oh, that's too bad because Mojo doesn't typically win a lot of these battles. I was rooting for Mojo that they would finally come through, but
They were close.
well,
They were close.
it's mostly a draw. But at the end of the day, Katie has determined that the Schleich Giant Anteater is the most accurate and is the one she would add to her collection. If you enjoyed this episode, please give us a like and a thumbs up. As always, please consider happyhentoys.com for all of your animal needs. We look forward to seeing you in the next video, and thank you for watching.